I was at my studio one evening and he came in and he was like, "What are you doing tonight?" And I was like, "Well, I was working on this." He's like, "Can you record something for me? Can you record me doing something?" I was like, "Sure." He goes, "Do you have a tape machine?" I'm like, "No." And he goes, "Well, it'll be okay." And so he goes, he had LJ with him, Jack Lawrence. And he's like, "Yeah, so I've got this piano thing and can I get a vocal?" And so I'm like, "Yeah, like, is it a keeper?" He goes, "No, this is all just a demo, it's no big deal." So I had this cool Ampex mic, this 1393, and it looks like it's like an Art Deco penis. And I like hooked it up and plugged it into a little deluxe reverb I had and put a mic on that. And I mic'd the piano. And then LJ had a bass rig and he was plugged in a little bass amp and he was just in the room. And Jack started playing this part. And I was like, "Hey, so are you going to put drums? Like, do you need a time? Do you need a click or something?" He's like, "Yeah, that'd be cool." I go, "Well, I got this old TR-77 drum machine. I'll just bring it in." I set it up on top of my piano and I go, "This is the rock and this is the deal." And he's like, "Oh, hit play, straight rock beat, boom, ta, boom, ta, that thing." But I said, "It's got a knob." I circuit bent it so that you take the hi-hat out. I go, "So you can turn that and you get the low, He's like, "Cool." So he starts playing and the lyrics are all like, it's the James Bond thing. It's the James Bond thing. And I'm like, "Oh shit," So then he played drums on it. Then we played electric guitar on it. And then I can't remember, we did something. I moved over to Mitch's, to my partner's spot for a little bit. I think maybe, I can't remember why. There was some reason. I think maybe there was something I booked in my room at night. But we got done like at 4 a.m. or whatever. And I drove home and I didn't even think anything about it, basically. And then a couple of weeks go by and he calls me and he's like, "Hey, we're going to book Blackbird because I'm doing the James Bond theme for the next James Bond movie." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And it was right when they were playing Bonnaroo. It was in June. And so I went and saw the Raconteurs of Bonnaroo on that Consolers tour. And then afterwards, I went back to Nashville. I stayed at Bonnaroo. I went back to Nashville and we spent 4 or 5 days at Blackbird. The crazy part was the first day we recorded. So I had put my drum machine in and that became the thing. We put it on tape. And then I had to go get the drum machine because he had some new parts he wanted. So we went and got it. But when we hooked it up, I had marked the speed, but of course it's not quite the same.
Right.
So like all the choruses are a little faster, which is kind of cool.
Which is not a bad thing.
It's totally good. And so we recorded these choruses and then I tape edited the whole thing together. And then and he was like, and they played drums on it. I just did this like 2 mic drum thing. Because I kind of thought he was going to have somebody play drums, but he just played drums. And then he's like, I can't be here tomorrow. I'm going to be gone. So, like however you guys do it, just edit these drums and make them sound like they're in time. So I spent a whole day kind of cutting and editing. And then where we couldn't cut and edit, it was fly over, edit, fly back, And what he was doing is he had flown to New York to do a session with Keith Richards, which comes up later, which is cool. But he came back and he's like, "Okay, cool. I want to do this solo part. I just got to put a placeholder." So he played the solo that's on the record. And then he was like, "We're going to do tic-tac bass." So he did his tic-tac bass part. He's like, "And then I've got Meg's drums in the Mercedes. I want to set them up and I want to do the drums again." But that's not what he wanted. He really just wanted to play drums over the choruses. So he doubled the drums in the chorus. And he's like, "Oh, and Alicia Keys is coming tonight." I'm like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "Yeah, she's flying in because she has a personal or private appearance to do in New York at 11. And so she's flying down. They drove over her and Swiss Beats, right? They drove over. great deal. She goes out in the room where we're set up, and I basically kind of set up the same thing. I set up like a vocal mic and then an amp, and she's like, "Oh, that's cool. That's a cool idea." And her husband, Swiss Beats, he's in the room, and she's like, "Okay, so just give me some playlists, man. I'm just gonna rock it." And Jack's like, "Well, we're on tape." She's like, "Oh, awesome. That's great." And then he's like, "Are you guys using reels? You all look crazy. You're crazy. What are you using reels for?" But so we did a few takes. I had a couple tracks, old school, put it on two or three tracks and then comp between them. And then she left, and she was awesome. She was sweet, and left. And then we recorded strings. We had 3 violins, one 5-string violin playing the viola part, and 2 cellos. And then we went home. We came in the next morning. We recorded Wayne Jackson and the Memphis Horns. The day before, I should say, Laura Matula, she was Jack's assistant at the time, played the piano on the track. And there's a great spot at the very end of it, right before the last beat. You hear her go, "Ah!" And that's just her hitting the wrong chord. We just left it in. And then Wayne came in, and then we hired this kid from Belmont, which is a music college here, who came in and played upright bass, and we very sped the tape machine up to get him to be able to play lower. And that, literally his eyes were just like, "You can do that?" Like, yeah, we want you to play where you can't play. So we're going to speed it up. And so there at the end, all the double bass, all that's like slowed down. And then we started mixing it. I had set up the Studio D in 5.1. We mix it in stereo. And then about midnight, I started mixing it in 5.1. I got home at 6 a.m. I got a call at the house here from their management at 11 that they needed a copy of the mix immediately. So I drove to town, and I guess the story is I sent them a digi delivery. Do you remember digi delivery back in those days?
Yeah.
I sent a digi delivery to the music director. He burned a CD, played it for Barbara Baccoli in her office. Then he took the CD over to the set in Italy where they were filming the opening sequence with all the naked girls doing the naked girls thing. And that's how tight the schedule was for it.
Wow.
It was that close.
And you didn't realize until like halfway through that any of it was Keeper.
Well, I knew we were doing it. I knew, but basically what had happened was that they booked Amy Winehouse to do the song with Mick Ronson, and she was out to lunch. And so he bailed. And then they asked Beyonce, and I think like she wanted millions and millions of dollars, and they were like, no. And then I think they wanted Annie Lennox, but she was like in South Africa. She couldn't do it. And so they had asked Jack initially, and he had said no. And then they came back to him and basically, probably made him an offer he couldn't refuse. But the interesting part is there was never a duet ever planned. That was Alicia. She's like, why don't I just rock the chorus? And Jack's like, no, let's not do that. Let's sing it together. She said, well, I love your verses. Let's just swap lines. He's like, okay. And so, you know what I mean? Like that's how it happened.
Man.
And then it just happened. I luckily kept it up on the board, and I printed stereo and 5.1 stems that day. And then later we tweaked it and, sent them stems. And then they, of course, cut it to shreds before they put it in the film.
Right.